I opened my door to find my in-laws, suitcases in hand, and behind them, a child with my husband's eyes. Our perfect life was about to be served a bitter, unthinkable truth. The smell of roasted chicken and rosemary filled our home, a scent I'd always associated with safety and love. Our son, Leo, was upstairs, finally sleeping peacefully after a rough week with his asthma. The air purifier hummed softly in his room, a constant guardian against the triggers that lurked outside our carefully controlled environment. This house wasn't just wood and brick to us. It was our fortress, a sanctuary we'd poured every penny and every dream into. It was surrounded by clean country air, far from the city smog that made my son's small lungs struggle for every breath. This was our forever home. I glanced at the clock. Mark was late, but that wasn't unusual. His work as a financial consultant often kept him in the city long after the sun went down. I fluffed the cushions on the sofa and straightened a framed photo of the three of us on the beach, a perfect day frozen in time. Leo was laughing, his face smeared with ice cream, and Mark was looking at me with a gaze that used to make my heart skip a beat. Lately, that gaze had been distant, cooler. I'd chalked it up to stress. A big project at work, he'd said. I tried not to worry. The sound of a car crunching on the gravel driveway pulled me from my thoughts. Finally. I smiled, ready to greet him with a warm plate and a warmer hug. But when I opened the front door, the smile froze on my face. It wasn't just Mark's car. Behind it was another, one I recognized instantly. His parents. My in-laws, Margaret and Richard, were getting out, pulling suitcases from their trunk. My heart started a frantic, uneven rhythm. They lived 3 hours away. They never, ever visited without calling first, usually weeks in advance. Margaret caught my eye and gave me a thin, tight-lipped smile that didn't reach her cold, assessing eyes. Richard just looked at the ground, his shoulders slumped. Mark walked up the steps, his face a stony mask. He didn't kiss me. He didn't even touch my arm. He just brushed past me, his briefcase hitting my hip as he went. "Sarah," he said, his voice flat and devoid of any emotion, "we need to talk. In the living room." A cold dread, sharp and icy, seeped into my bones. "Mark, what's going on? Why are your parents here? Are they okay?" "They're fine," he said, not looking at me. He sat on the edge of the armchair, the one I always thought of as his chair. But he looked like a stranger in it. His parents filed in behind him, perching on the sofa like two vultures waiting for something to die. Margaret placed her handbag primly on her lap, her posture ramrod straight. My hands started to tremble. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold it together. "Okay, we're talking. What is this?" Mark didn't answer right away. Instead, he placed his briefcase on the coffee table and clicked it open. He pulled out not files, but a single laminated sheet of paper. It looked like a list. My stomach churned. This felt rehearsed, planned. An ambush in my own home. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Sarah," he began, his voice like a news anchor reporting a distant tragedy. "About our life, our assets, the future. For Leo." He said Leo's name like a weapon, and I flinched. Things are going to be changing. I've made some decisions that are in the best interest of this family. "Decisions?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "What decisions? You don't make decisions without me, Mark. We're a team." Margaret let out a short, sharp scoff from the sofa. I ignored her, keeping my eyes locked on my husband. He looked down at the paper in his hands, refusing to meet my gaze. "I've outlined a new structure for our living arrangement, for our finances, a clear path forward." He started to read from the list, his voice a monotonous drone. He went through finances, bills, a new budget that slashed my personal allowance to almost nothing. He talked about school choices for Leo, things we were supposed to decide together. Each point was a blow, chipping away at the foundation of our 15-year marriage. I felt like I was suffocating. He paused, taking a deep breath before delivering the final, devastating point. He looked up, and for the first time that night, his eyes met mine. They were cold, empty voids. 13, he said, his voice ringing with a chilling finality. The house is ours and our son's. We'll live together. Lena gets the flat. The world tilted on its axis. The smell of the roasting chicken suddenly seemed nauseating. Ours? Who was ours? My mind reeled, trying to process the words. We'll live together, his parents. He meant he and his parents and Leo, here, in my home, and the flat. Our investment property in the city, the nest egg we were saving for Leo's college education. It was gone. Given to... My voice was a strangled croak. Lena? Who? Who the hell is Lena? Mark's lips thinned into a hard line. He didn't answer. Instead, his mother Margaret stood up, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She walked over to the hallway and gestured outside. Richard, on cue, opened the front door wider. And then I heard it. The gentle, rhythmic click of high heels on our stone porch. A woman stepped into the light of our hallway, her silhouette framed by the doorway. She was young, beautiful, and she was holding the hand of a small child, a little boy, no older than 3, with Mark's dark curly hair and his piercing blue eyes. For a moment, nobody breathed. The air in the hallway grew thick, heavy with unspoken truths. The little boy, Daniel, I would later learn his name was, looked up at me with wide, curious eyes. Mark's eyes. He had Mark's chin, the same slight wave in his dark hair. He was a perfect miniature replica of the man I had married, the man I thought I knew. My mind fractured, trying to make sense of the impossible image before me. This wasn't real. It was a nightmare, a scene from a twisted play, and soon I would wake up. But I didn't wake up. The woman, Lena, gave Mark a look, a mixture of apprehension and entitlement. She was beautiful in that effortless way I never was, with long dark hair and a slender frame. She looked like she belonged on the cover of a magazine, not standing in the hallway of my home, holding my husband's other life by the hand. My gaze snapped back to Mark. He stood there, impassive, a stranger wearing my husband's skin. Mark, I said again, and this time my voice was a raw, serrated edge. Explain this now. I believe it's self-explanatory, Margaret chirped from the sofa, her voice dripping with venomous satisfaction. Mark has finally secured the future of this family with a proper heir. A wave of nausea washed over me. A proper heir. The insult was aimed directly at Leo, at his fragile health, at every terrified night I'd spent by his bedside, listening to him struggle for breath. The fury that erupted inside me was volcanic. It burned away the shock, the confusion, and left behind a core of pure, white-hot rage. Get out, I snarled, my voice low and dangerous. I pointed a trembling finger at Lena. Get her and that child out of my house. Mark took a step forward, positioning himself between me and them, a human shield for his new family. Sarah, stop being hysterical. This is our house. Our house, I screeched, the sound tearing from my throat. You and me and Leo, this is our son's home, the one place he can breathe, and you bring this into it? Daniel is my son, too, Mark said, his voice dropping to a dangerously calm level. And he deserves a home. He deserves his father. Lena has been very patient, waiting for years for me to sort this out. The waiting is over. Years. The word echoed in the cavernous new hole in my chest. This wasn't a recent mistake. This was a calculated, long-term betrayal. The late nights at work, the business trips, the emotional distance, it all clicked into place with sickening clarity. I had been living a lie. So this is your plan? I laughed, a broken, hysterical sound. You move your mistress and your bastard child into my home, with your parents as chaperones, and you expect me to just... What? Move into the flat? Pack up my life and disappear so you can play happy families? It's a very generous offer, Mark said, as if discussing a severance package. The flat is fully paid off. It's yours. No strings attached. You can start over." "Start over? My life is here. My son's life is here." I was screaming now, tears of rage and betrayal streaming down my face. "I will not let you take this house from him. I will not let you endanger his health for her. I will fight you for every single brick, Mark. I'll take you for everything you have." Richard flinched on the sofa, looking deeply uncomfortable, but Margaret just smirked. She knew something I didn't. Mark's face hardened. The last flicker of the man I once loved died in his eyes, replaced by something cold and ruthless. "I was hoping you wouldn't be difficult, Sarah. I really was, for Leo's sake." He walked back to his briefcase and pulled out another set of documents. He fanned them out on the coffee table for me to see. They were official looking, covered in stamps and signatures. "You can't fight me, Sarah," he said, his voice flat, "because there's nothing to fight for. I had the deed to the city flat transferred into Lena's name 2 weeks ago. It's her legal property now. It was never a gift to you. It's her settlement." I stared at the papers, my blood running cold. He'd given our investment, Leo's college fund, to this woman. The betrayal was so deep it stole my breath. But the final blow was yet to come. "And as for this house," he continued, his tone clinical, "I'm afraid you've misunderstood the situation. When we were struggling with the business a couple of years ago, I had to remortgage. Heavily. You signed the papers. My parents agreed to co-sign, to inject their own money to secure the loan." He gestured to Margaret and Richard. "Their names are on the deed right alongside mine. Your name, Sarah, isn't. Legally, you are a resident in a property owned by me and my parents. You have no claim. You have nothing." The world fell away. The roaring in my ears was so loud I could barely hear Mark's final crushing words. "You have no claim. You have nothing." I swayed on my feet, grabbing the back of a chair for support as my legs threatened to give out. I remembered signing those papers. I remembered Mark telling me it was a formality, a simple refinancing to get a better interest rate. He'd slid them in front of me late one night, a thick stack of jargon I couldn't possibly decipher. "Just sign here, honey," he'd said, his pen pointing to the little X's. I'd trusted him. I had trusted him with our future, with our son's security, and he had used that trust to meticulously strip me of everything. My eyes darted from Mark's cold, triumphant face to Margaret's smug grin. This was her masterpiece. The years of subtle digs, of making me feel like I wasn't good enough for her precious son, had all led to this moment. She had orchestrated my downfall, funding it with her own money, and now she was sitting on my sofa, ready to take my place. You planned this," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "Both of you. All of you." "We did what was necessary to protect the family legacy," Margaret said, her voice like ice. "Mark needed a son to carry on the family name, a strong one. And now he has one." The venom in her words, the blatant dismissal of my precious Leo, ignited the last reserves of my strength. The grief and shock receded, replaced by a cold, sharp-edged fury I had never felt before. I was no longer a weeping victim. I was a mother bear whose cub was being threatened. I stood up straight, my spine turning to steel. I wiped the tears from my face with the back of my hand. "Get out of my house," I said again, but this time my voice was low, steady, and full of command. It held a power that surprised even me. Mark's expression flickered. "Sarah, don't be ridiculous. We've been over this. This isn't your house." "This is my son's home," I corrected him, my gaze unwavering. "And you are not welcome here. None of you. You will take your guests, and you will leave. We can discuss the terms of your departure from my life tomorrow, with my lawyer." Lena, who had been silent this whole time, finally spoke up. "Mark, she's not listening," she whined, pulling on his arm. "Daniel is tired. I want to put him to bed." I snapped my head towards her. "The only child who will be sleeping in this house tonight is my son, Leo. You can find a hotel." Mark stepped forward, his face contorted with anger. "That's enough. I am the primary owner of this house, and I say they are staying. You are the one who will be leaving, Sarah. You can pack a bag and go to a hotel yourself until you can move into the flat your sister rents." The flat my sister rents, not the flat he offered me. The flat he had already given to his mistress. The cruelty was breathtaking. He expected me to go, homeless and humiliated, to my sister's tiny apartment. Suddenly, a small voice piped up from the top of the stairs. "Mommy, what's all the shouting?" My blood ran cold. Leo. He was standing there in his dinosaur pajamas, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, his small nebulizer clutched in his hand like a teddy bear. His gaze swept over the scene in the living room, the strange people, the suitcases, my tear-stained face, his father's angry posture. His little brow furrowed in confusion and fear. Everything stopped. The fight, the anger, the betrayal, it all vanished. The only thing that mattered was the terrified little boy on the stairs. "It's nothing, sweetie," I said, forcing my voice to be calm and reassuring. "Daddy's colleagues are just here for a late meeting. Go back to bed. I'll be up in a minute to tuck you in." Leo looked uncertainly at Mark, his little face pleading for an explanation. Mark, for the first time, looked truly uncomfortable. He couldn't meet his son's gaze. Margaret, however, had no such shame. "Leo, come down here and meet your new brother," she said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "This is Daniel." Leo's eyes widened, first at the strange woman and then at the little boy holding her hand. The air crackled with a tension far worse than our shouting. It was the sound of a child's world shattering. I saw the confusion in Leo's eyes turn to a deep, wrenching hurt. He looked at me, his lip trembling, and then he did something that terrified me more than any legal document or angry threat. He took a shaky, wheezing breath, then another. The faint, high-pitched whistle began in his chest, the sound that haunted my nightmares, an asthma attack, triggered by the stress, the sudden upheaval in his sanctuary. "No," I breathed, rushing towards the stairs. "Mark, look what you've done!" As I reached Leo, his breathing was already becoming labored. His small face was pale, his eyes wide with panic. I fumbled with his nebulizer, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Mark stood frozen, his face a mask of horror. Even Margaret looked momentarily shocked out of her smug victory. The house, his safe space, had become the source of his terror. And as I held my struggling child in my arms, a chilling realization dawned on me. This wasn't just about a house or money. This was about my son's life. They weren't just trying to throw me out. They were putting Leo's health, his very survival, at risk. I looked from my wheezing son to the people who had invaded our home, and I knew this was a war I could not afford to lose. But as I fumbled with the medicine, my mind racing, I saw Lena whispering something urgently into Mark's ear. He listened, his expression shifting from panic to a cold, hard resolve. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Yes, hello," he said, his voice clipped and official. "I need to report a disturbance. My wife, she's become unstable. She's a danger to our son." My blood turned to ice. "Unstable? You monster!" I shrieked, cradling Leo's small, trembling body against mine. His wheezing was getting worse, a desperate rasping sound that tore through the sudden silence. I administered the albuterol, my movements automatic even as my world imploded. This was his plan. Not just to replace me, but to erase me, to paint me as a hysterical, unfit mother so he could take my son. "Mark, what are you doing?" Richard, his father, finally spoke, his voice horrified. "Hang up that phone!" "Stay out of this, Dad," Mark snapped, his eyes fixed on me with a terrifying coldness. "She's out of control. The police will see it. It's for the best." But Margaret placed a restraining hand on her husband's arm. "Let him, Richard. It's cleaner this way." Cleaner. The word echoed in the sterile, clinical way he was trying to amputate me from our lives. While Leo fought for breath in my arms, I saw the end game. The police would arrive. see a screaming, distraught woman and a calm, collected man. They'd see his legal documents, his concerned parents, his new, quiet family waiting in the wings. He was building a narrative, and I was the villain. But in that moment of absolute despair, something shifted. The mother bear inside me didn't just roar. She started to think. He thought he had all the power, all the documents, all the control. But he'd forgotten one thing. He'd forgotten me. He'd forgotten who I was before I was just his wife. "Fine," I said, my voice suddenly calm, cutting through the tension like glass. Everyone stared at me. I gently soothed Leo, whose breathing was slowly, thankfully, starting to ease with the medication. "Call them, Mark. In fact, please do. Tell them to send an ambulance for my son as well, since his father has knowingly created a life-threatening environment for him." I looked directly at Lena. "And while they're on their way, perhaps you should call your husband. What was his name again? David, wasn't it? David Miller. The wealthy property developer you've been married to for the last 5 years." Lena's face went white. Mark's jaw dropped. "What are you talking about?" he stammered. "Oh, did you not know?" I asked, my voice dripping with mock sympathy. I slowly stood up, Leo still held protectively in my arms. "Mark, you've been so busy with your big project at work, the one you told me about. Well, I had some free time. I'm a paralegal, remember? It's what I did for 10 years before Leo was born. I'm good at research, really good." I started pacing, my every step deliberate. "The distance, the secrets, I wasn't as blind as you thought. A few weeks ago, I hired a private investigator. Cost a fortune, but worth every penny. He followed you, Mark, to a certain city flat, the one you so generously gave to Lena. He got pictures, lots of them. He also got Lena's details, and that's when it got interesting. Lena Miller, wife of David Miller. No divorce on record, which means, Mark, my dear, that your son, Daniel, well, there's a very high probability he's not actually your son at all. Legally, he's David Miller's son. Adultery is one thing, but trying to claim another man's legitimate heir, that's a whole other level of fraud." Margaret gasped, her face a mask of disbelief. Lena was shaking her head, whispering, "No, no, no." I didn't stop. "And the house? The deed? You were clever, I'll give you that. You leveraged your parents' money to push me off the title. But you did it under false pretenses. You had me sign refinancing papers, telling me it was to save our family business, but you were already liquidating that business, funneling the assets into a new account, an account I also found. You committed marital fraud. You convinced your parents to invest in this home under the assumption that it was for their grandchild, Leo, not for your mistress and another man's child. I wonder how a judge will see that. Co-conspirators in a scheme to defraud your legal wife and child." Richard sank back onto the sofa, looking ill. Margaret stared at her son, her triumphant smirk finally gone, replaced by dawning horror. Mark was sputtering, his face turning a blotchy red. "You're lying! This is a trick!" "Am I?" I walked over to the bookshelf, to a hollowed-out copy of War and Peace. I pulled out a thick manila envelope and threw it onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud, spilling photos of Mark and Lena kissing outside the flat, copies of Lena's marriage certificate, and preliminary bank statements from Mark's hidden account. "The police are on their way, Mark. That's good," I said, my voice ice. "When they get here, I will be filing a report for fraud, and I will be requesting a restraining order to keep you and all of these people away from my son. Your little plan to have me declared unstable is going to backfire spectacularly when my lawyer presents this evidence. You won't get this house. You won't get my son. In fact, after David Miller's lawyers are done with you and Lena for criminal conversation and alienation of affection, you'll be lucky if you have a penny to your name." The front door creaked open. We all turned. It wasn't the police. It was my sister, Karen, and her husband, Tom, who was built like a rugby player. I'd sent her a one-word text message 20 minutes ago. Help. She took in the scene in an instant. Sarah? Leo? Are you okay? We are now, I said, a real smile finally touching my lips. I looked at Mark, at his parents, at the crumbling facade of his new life. They were trespassers now, and they knew it. I think, I said, my voice ringing with the authority they had tried to strip from me, it's time for you all to leave.